This is Advisor 3.0, a show designed to help you as a financial advisor elevate your professional practice, transform your clients' lives, and take your business to the next level. I am Abraham Okusoya. Welcome to the show. Over the past decade or so, we've talked a lot about how the role of the financial planner has evolved to becoming more of life planning and helping the clients live the better version, of their own definition of life, whatever that means. And I am excited today to have again on the podcast a repeat guest, the grandfather of life planning, and that is none other than the legendary George Kinder, and to explore his latest thinking and in his new book on the subject titled The Three Domains of Freedom. George, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Abraham. Believe it or not, I've been really looking forward to this. It's such a good thing to be in conversation with you.
So have I, and thank you very much for making the time to be here on the podcast. So this will be your seventh book? Am I getting this wrong?
Well, there's actually 5 books that I've published digitally and have not come out in hardcover or softcover, but that are available. So I've actually published, I think now 12 books, believe it or not, and
wow.
So it's something. It feels really quite something. Yeah.
It's incredible stuff. So tell us about the new book, The Three Domains of Freedom.
Yeah. Well, it's a brief book. I mean, it's small. You can see the cover of it. Let me just see if I can find a copy here that you could just look at how. See, it's thin, right? And
160 page.
Yeah. So so it's easy to read. You can read it in about an hour and a quarter. But the reason that I wrote it wasn't to make it really short to read. I wrote it. I think of it as a book of wisdom, more so than any of my other books. And so it's a book that you can read in an hour and a quarter, but it's also a book that you can return to again and again and gather some depth, something profound, something meaningful for yourselves. And I think my thought as I'm aging, as you say, you've written all these books, what do you do next? And my thought was, I want to have something that might be read by our kids or even our grandkids. So something that lasts. So I tried to condense much of what I've shared, but also there's really new stuff, fresh material in here as well, into this small book of wisdom. Yeah. The Three Domains of Freedom. And it's about 3 domains. It's about each moment is yours, your life is yours. And the one we're all troubled by, you and I were just talking, the election in America is about to happen. Civilization is yours. So we often don't think that civilization is ours. But we all long for freedom. So anyway, it's a book that touches on how do you experience that in each of those domains.
So let's start with the 3 domains. The first one being your life, your moments, and and civilization.
Right. Yeah. So the first one is each moment is yours. And I might have mentioned this in our last podcast a few years ago, but I used to ask a trick question of big audiences. I'd say, have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past? Walking the beach, making love. You were just in America, on the beaches there in Florida, and I get everybody to raise their hand. And I tell them it's a trick question. And then I tell them they all got it wrong because we've never experienced a moment of freedom. in the past. The only time we experience anything really, and particularly freedom, is in the present moment. So, so the present moment is, we hardly look at it. We just go, oh yeah, I know that, but I'm doing all these other things, and I'm kind of doing them in the present moment, aren't I? But there are all these ways that the present moment gets in our way. Life gets in our way, and so there are practices that we can do that can really lift that up and bring us freedom in each moment. Yeah.
So in financial planning generally,
Yeah.
we are very often quite long-term focused. We're focused on the longer term, saving for retirement someday, achieving, financial freedom, whatever that means, but someday, we are telling clients to focus on the longer term. But you talk in this book about enjoying the moment, living and living the moment. Talk. Why is that important?
I think, this is a big statement, but I think in some ways the present moment is our legacy. And I don't know, I just, grapple with that a little bit and think about that. The present moment is our legacy. And we people often say, well, live in the moment, that kind of thing. It isn't so much about living in the moment to me. I'm really interested in freedom. How do we deliver freedom to our clients? Here we are, you're talking about that in the advisory realm. But also, in order to know that, we ought to know what freedom is inside of ourselves. And there are a variety of ways. One of them is Your Life is Yours, which is the client-based life planning approach. But there's also about civilization, which can interfere with our ability to be free. And the present moment, the plumbing explodes in our house, or we're in a dispute with a neighbor, or we're not getting along with our partner or our spouse. There are all these things that can really disturb us in the present moment, even though we're on a trajectory to live that life that we're meant to live. So it's really very important. One of the things that I have reflected on a lot, I think a lot about evolution, and I think about how is it that we evolve as individuals, but also how is it that civilization evolves? And I think that that evolution is not about us becoming smarter. It's not about these computers and all of that. It's really about our becoming more awake and more free inside ourselves. And that's what evolution is meant to kind of bring us toward. And the more that we are free and the more we are awake, the more we're capable of really making a difference for our family, for our friends, for our community, for our businesses. So the present moment's part of that, and we tend to forget it. But if you think about the present moment's the only moment that ever really exists, well, isn't there some way to study that or to learn how to experience that? And the main practice for that, I think, is mindfulness, because it constantly brings us back to the present moment. And when we miss that, the reason it's hard, it's difficult, is because the present moment keeps changing on us. So when we miss the present moment in that practice of mindfulness or meditation, that's because that's our cutting edge. That's where we're meant to learn. So it's a good thing. The challenges that meditation presents to most of us, even to me after 50 years of doing it quite a bit, it's challenging. But it brings us closer and closer to not being distracted, but to being right here with each other and with Mother Nature, with our kids, with our clients, all of that.
I love a quote you have in the book referring, I think it's a William Blake, sort of a poem, and I'll read it out. And you talk about, there is a moment in each day that Satan cannot find, nor can his watch friends find it, but the industrious find this moment, but the industrials find this moment and it multiply. And when it once is found, it renovates every moment of the day if rightly placed. And then you went on to talk about this map of mindfulness. And so I'm trying to think about how you apply this in the real world. Is the idea that you deliberately set out in the day to find that moment by, meditation or whatever, and that kind of sets the tone for the rest of your day? Is that how you think about it, or am I getting this completely mocked up?
Well, you really nailed it, Abraham, and beautifully so. It's one of my favorite quotes from William Blake, and a couple of my great heroes lived in London, which is why and most of their lives, which is why I love going back to it. And one of them was William Blake, and of course William Shakespeare is another one who was there at the time, but earlier. But it's an incredible quote, and I've found it personally to be really very helpful. That if you wake up and you're out of sorts, it kind of messes with your day. Sometimes all day you feel kind of out of sorts. But if you can find some way to center yourself, to give yourself a ground, to feel really here, and you really land that, and that's what Blake is talking about. There is a moment in every day that Satan cannot find, that our disturbances cannot find. Find that moment and then build upon it. What I've found is that if I can, in those days that I wake up and I'm out of sorts, if I can land that moment, the rest of my day feels so much more together, more clear, more precise, more kind, more accomplished, and not kind of out at sea, lost at sea. So it's a beautiful quote. And then you mentioned the map of mindfulness. One of the things that I'm proud of, and one of the things that I've done that I think is very unusual, is that I argue, as you can see, that our universe is really not space and time the way we think of it, because those maps of space and time have the past and the future in it. But the past and the future are kind of relics and prophecies. They're not as real as the present moment. They have a reality to them. It's important, but they're not as real as the present moment. So I did a map, and thank you for referencing it. I love it, called the Map of Mindfulness, which puts the present moment at the center of the universe. And when you do that, you realize that the present moment is about our relationship to it. So it's about waking up in the present moment. And the practices that bring us again and again to the present moment end up diminishing our self-centeredness, our greediness, our neuroticism. And so what they do is they build, and this is at the base of the map, they actually build virtue inside of ourselves. They bring more spirit. I mean, here, Blake, Protestant mystic, they bring more spirit into our lives by being more here. Blake's a wonderful example of that.
How do you reconcile this with a financial planner who might say, some of this kind of sounds like hugging trees or being religious? You're now telling me that, I enjoy a better level of freedom if I just take time in my day to live and enjoy freedom in the present moment, but I'm not religious and I don't. What do you say to that, planner?
Well, I think it's a very legitimate question, and it's because it's one that we're kind of engaged with. It's the kind of world that we're in, that we have that kind of thinking. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do with the book is to raise questions so that people begin to think about it. But even if you are that kind of planner, don't you want to be more present for your clients? Don't you want to really be here in that engagement if you want to deliver them into their dream of freedom? And isn't that what financial planning is really all about, is delivering them into that dream of freedom. So just in terms of your ability to listen, one of the things that I realized a while ago is that the best listeners in the financial world tend to be financial planners, because they're, rather than just selling products, because they're really listening to who the client wants to be. And that the best of those listeners, those financial planners, tend to be life planners, because they're really dedicated to the client's life flourishing. And the best of those listeners, those life planners, are people who meditate, because then they're practicing it. The practice is cumulative. Every time you do it, you're getting better. You don't realize it because you feel all thumbs. You feel terrible at it, but we all do. That can't help. You can't help it because time just marches on. But you're getting better at it, and so that's one thing that I would say. And then the second thing is that if we're focused on too much on retirement, way out there, you can see, you can't even see my hands. You know, we're missing bringing the client to an experience of freedom right now. I was talking with someone just the other day, Abraham, and they were saying, "Well, what is freedom?" And as we talked, they realized that when they are really living their life plan, like, man, I'm making this happen, they're feeling that freedom. And that's right. So when in life planning, we want to bring the client to that experience. And that isn't going to happen by working for something that's 30 years away, even 10 years away. It's going to be working for something that is starting to happen right now. And a good portion of it is going to happen within the next few years. And then you've got them really alive and cooking. And boy, you've done something for them. You've raised their energy level 20% in their life. And suddenly they're better listeners to their kids and their clients and the people they're engaged with. It's a wonderful thing.
One of the practices that I've heard many life planners talk about is this kind of pre-client meeting type preparation or meditation, if you like. So they're going into a client meeting and they've done all the call it the preparation around numbers and whatever, but they take 10 minutes before they go into that meeting just to keep quiet and meditate, because they want to go into that meeting ready to listen. They want to put aside all of their own, we all have our own individual worries about our business and whatever, but they want to get all of that out of their mind as before they go into the meeting with the client.
Right. One of the things that people don't realize is that mindfulness meditation is a specific training to listen better. And the reason is just exactly what you're saying. We're really listening inside ourselves. So I call it inner listening sometimes. But what we're not like listening to sentences and phrases and all that kind of stuff. We're listening to something that is immediate and fresh in the present moment. And so that's like, I don't know how to describe it, but that we follow the breath, or nature is the most wonderful teacher of being in the present moment, right? Because you walk out in the air and suddenly you feel it on your skin. And it's never in the past or in the future. It's always right here. So that's what mindfulness does. And so if we take that 10 minutes before meeting with a client, we are fresher for them, and they feel it. They know it. They know that we're here for them. It's cool.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. The second domain, your life is yours. Talk about why that is a domain of freedom and why.
Yeah. It's a really good question. In some ways, we think of freedom, mostly we talk about it in civilization. Our public discourse about freedom is mostly about the freedom of a people. So we think about the democracy that the UK kind of started with, and America kind of exploded with, and that now is a little bit, we're a little tense around over here in America anyway. But so we talk about freedom in that way, but the way we experience it ourselves individually, and I know this was true for me as a young man, I felt I had to work for the boss. I had to work for a company, or I was tied to a clock, and I wasn't really free. So, so I think the way we feel it in our lives is we want to be free, and we have some vision of what that is. And maybe it is walking the beach in Florida. Maybe it's writing the great British novel. Maybe it's playing jazz in a club on Wednesday nights. Maybe it's these days it's doing video, fresh, wildly creative video on TikTok or Instagram. But we all have a dream of freedom, and that's the beauty of taking financial planning, and even taking financial advice, making it financial planning, and then taking financial planning and making it life planning. Because it's not about the money. It's not about the product. It's the client wants to live a life that's extraordinary for themselves. It may be very kind and very humane, or it may be wildly entrepreneurial and creative, but they've got a vision of who they want to be. Your life is yours. So that second domain of freedom is really all about what you and I've talked about in the past. And I know what's dear to both of our hearts, which is making sure that our clients find the most efficient way to live that dream of freedom for themselves.
And in the book, you revisit the three questions, which I never tire of hearing, right? Because it's so powerful. So maybe you want to go into that again, but I also want to ask you about you had the 5 expression or 5 pursuits of that individual freedom. So I guess from a financial planner's point of view, how do you get to really helping the client work out that personal individual domain of freedom in their lives?
Yeah, great question, Abraham. And in the work that I've trained people in the work, the financial life planning work, we've got a number of exercises that we do to try to narrow a person's many goals and objectives down to what's absolutely the most profound for them, the most meaningful, or the thing that would bring them most alive. And usually a client goes into a financial advisor's office, and they might have filled it out at home, and they bring in, and it's a grab bag list of things. What do you like to do when you're free? What do you want to do in retirement? What do you want for your family? So they're narrow questions. They're not useless, but they don't really get at what would be extraordinary in the person's life. They don't aim at that. So one of the things I recognized early on was that we needed a structure that would actually aim at what was most important. So the 3 questions are the manner that we do it in life planning that I think has been most popular and most profound, and it really gets at what that dream of freedom is. And so the first question is really loosening you up, and it could be in any financial advisor's list of questions. If you had all the money you needed for the rest of your life, what would you do? And you and I, we love that question, right? Because we've all dreamed of the different things we might do if we just had a little bit more means, a little more resources. And so it's a really cool question for people. And everybody's thought about, what if they won the lottery? What would they do? So there you go. And so you start with that, and it begins them to get the client to think about all the different categories that how freedom might express itself in their life. And then you ask 2 more questions, and you go deeper with each of them. The second question is, and both of them have to do with life and death. So the second question is that you go to the doctor and they shock you with the realization that you have a rare ailment, and you have at most 10 years to live. You're guaranteed to live 5, and you'll live as healthy as you feel right now, but you won't make it to that 10th year. So if you only had 5 to 10 years left to live, what would you do differently in your life? How would you live your life? And that really touches something that's quite wonderful for people, because it touches the heart more. How would I live? Who would I be with? Where would I be? How much would I be working? How much would I be in places that I just love, more like on a vacation? And what do I owe to the world? What do I want to give back in some way? All of those things come up. And so it loosens people up like that. And it becomes a terribly valuable question if you're trying to figure out where a person wants to go. You don't get that from that grab bag list of, all the things you might do in retirement, all that. You just don't get it. And the third question goes deeper still, and people misinterpret this. They think that it's about what would you do if you only had one day left, but that's not it at all. This time you go to the doctor, and the doctor does shock you with this notion that they've misdiagnosed something, and you've got a rare ailment, and you've got 24 hours left. And the question is not what you would do, go to the pub, gather your family around. The question is reflecting on how you'd anticipated living in your life for the rest of your life. What do you see that you've missed? What is it that you didn't get to do? Who is it that you didn't get to be? And that's it. That third question aims right here. What have you missed? And that's where the financial plan, the financial life plan, gets born. And so you can see why it isn't going to be in that grab bag of questions. And often a client in that grab bag of questions, even if you spend time talking about those things, the client often, they don't quite trust us. We're mostly in finance. We're mostly maybe selling product or showing spreadsheets or numbers or something. So they need to feel that sense of trust with us. And that's why we spend a lot of time really listening and showing that we're here for them. And then they're willing to go deep with us. And it's typical that in that third question, what is most important to them comes forth. And that's what you want to deliver into their life. Because if they get that, their life is going to be so much more alive, so much more free, so much more humane, so much more present to who they feel they're meant to be. So, and 5, did you want to talk about 5 pursuits, or did you want to?
I mean, just a comment from me, George. Listening to you ask those questions, they're so powerful. And the order of the questions is important as well, because even as someone who, all my life, you set goals and all these things, I've had several conversations with my wife. We just came back from the US, and it would be like, oh, I might want to live in the US someday. And, this, and you throw all these things into the universe. And then, 1 minute you want to live in the US, another minute, maybe that's not that important. But to have these 3 questions set up in a way that enables you to get to the heart of the matter, to get to what's really important to the client. And chances are nobody's ever asked them that question before, ever.
That's right. Yeah.
That is powerful.
It's very powerful. And it makes our place in the world as financial advisors a really privileged place, because we're sitting there with clients, and sometimes they've never talked with each other, if in a couple, about this kind of thing, and what is really meaningful for them. And It's the most beautiful thing in the world. I loved working with couples because you'd see them fall in love again, Abraham. It's like, oh, I didn't realize you wanted to do that, or I didn't realize you still like that, And it's like, oh my God, they're picking up little threads, and they're going to go home and treat each other with so much more affection, with tenderness, with clarity, with kindness, with precision as to where they're going. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. So it is. It's an amazing thing that we're doing. But what is money for if it's not for that? This was what financial advice is destined to be about, because it's what we really want. We want freedom. And so you ask, the second domain of freedom is the one we most relate to. Do I want to live in Florida, and how quick can I get there? And can I spend a few more weeks there this next year and just see what it's like? And I've done that, of course, with London, with England, because I love being in the UK so much. And without asking those questions and really looking at them, we don't really go at them. And what's great about being a financial advisor is that all their excuses, it's just money. You can manipulate money in different ways. You can put the budget together in different ways. If they're excited about something, don't you think they'd be willing to maybe save a little bit more, or maybe not spend as much over here? Maybe they're not going to redo the kitchen because they really want to get to Florida. So it's that kind of thing that we, and only we, have the power, the authority, the presence, and the clarity to be able to deliver for a client. It's incredible.
Yeah. And would you ask them this again when they see you for your next planning meeting with them? What sort of time would you put between the first time you ask it and the second time you ask it and the third time, just out of interest?
Yeah. So, well, there's two things that I think of when you say that. One is, if you really deliver the life plan, when would you come back and look at it again? And I would say anytime there's a crisis in a person's life is a time to begin to look at those things again. And the second thing that I would say is that just answering those questions isn't the end. That the process that we go through, it's so powerful. It's not just the questions that make it powerful, but designing, one of the exciting and creative and heartwarming things is that from the answers to these questions, we design something that we call the dream of freedom, or the torch. And so in the next meeting, or maybe at the end of that meeting, we will put the most incredible things together for the client, the most profound, but also sprinkle in some of the cool things, like, spending a week in Hawaii or whatever it might be. We sprinkle some of those things in, and we put it together as a dream of freedom and say, how would it be how would it be if you lived like this, if this was your life? And we get an enormous, sometimes gasp, sometimes tears, sometimes gasp of excitement, disbelief. And what really gets driven in the process is tremendous energy. So the client gets so excited about that dream of freedom that then the next meeting, which is about the obstacles, is pretty easy to unravel and do. The client realizes, I can take care of those obstacles. And where they can't, you've got the money skills. And so you can say, hey, don't worry about that. We can rearrange some things around the finances. We can make that happen. And part of your job is to keep that energy high. That's even more part of your job than making sure the budget's right. Because if the energy's high, they're going to make the budget right. It's going to work. So anyway, so part of it is, when do you ask it again? You keep going with the process until they're launching it. And that launch is, well, typically they're beginning to feel free at the end of that meeting. Man, I mean, that's the amazing thing. Certainly with a matter of months, always within a matter of 3 years, maybe a year and a half is the longest usual time where they begin to really feel it. But it's happening pretty much right away.
It's incredible stuff. And if there are any financial planners out there who haven't gone through the 5 day course, I mean, I don't know if you've changed the programs around, or even the master program, the life planning mastery program. I highly recommend it. The best financial planners that I meet are the ones who have gone through, some of the ones who've gone through these programs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The thought. Let's talk about the third domain, which I kind of think to myself, bearing in mind where we are in the world today, George. I mean, the Middle East is blowing up. Even the US seems to be, it feels that way. I don't want to use the word imploding, even, in terms of the political. I know that's short term, the election cycle. And then, of course, even here in the UK, there is so much. I don't know if you followed, LinkedIn conversation around the budget and all that stuff. There is so much negativity about the direction of travel of the country. And then here comes George, the eternal optimist. And he's going to talk to us about civilization, certainly in the Western world, being the third domain of freedom. Remind me why this is the case?
Well, for all the reasons you mentioned. I mean, we feel so trapped and so bothered by what's happening. But don't you feel like we were born to live in freedom? And aren't we better as people if we do, individually and as a community? Don't we? There are some people, the trillionaires out there who, they really feel like they're in freedom, but in fact, they're really trapped in their whatever their mindset is. But if everybody around you felt freedom, wouldn't your freedom feel that much more flourishing in a way? So democracy was one of those things. I mean, the history of humanity is the history in many ways of developing and delivering more and more freedoms to more and more people. And right now we are in a tough place. I'm with you on all of that. And it's terrifying. Here we are in America. The elections tomorrow is terrifying for everybody in America, let me tell you. But a couple of things about that. One is that, or a number of things. One is that there's this saying, I'm sure you've heard it many times, it's always darkest before the dawn.
Mm.
And sometimes you need to go through, personally, don't we grow the most when we've gone through a struggle that's been really difficult for us? When we've gotten challenged emotionally in some way and we've gone through it and we arrive at a better place in some way, at a place of greater wisdom. So I'm not afraid of the darkness. And there's a way in which I think that no matter what, even if America implodes and the world is at war, which is, clearly one of the things that's out there, right? And not only that, the world imploding, America imploding, the world at war, and the planet becoming inhospitable to human species. Those are all things that we're like, oh my God, look at that. We hear something new and we go, oh my God, how are we going to handle this? Are we going to be able to handle it? And so that's really been what my focus has been, is that we've conquered many things. We've accomplished many things. There's a better term for it. And why can't we accomplish this? What is it? Is it a simple problem? Is it a complex problem? We tend to think it's so complex and it's so overwhelming. There's 8 billion of us, and how can I, as one of those 8 billion, make any difference? And moreover, how can I, with my pittance of wealth and income, compete with those billionaires out there who are making the decisions of those huge countries or those countries at war? And I think that it's easy for us then to diminish our power and become, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they call it codependent on the powers above us that be. That's not freedom. That's not where we're meant to be. And that's not who we're meant to be as people. Civilization is who we are. And if civilization is bullying each other, is killing each other, is causing other human beings on the planet to starve to death, that's just simply wrong. And in some way, we know that. That's wrong. That's not who we want to be. Think about who you want your children to be, basically. Are these models for how you want your children to be? So there is a value in each of us confronting that and looking at, is there something that I can do? And there's a reason why all of this trouble is happening right now. And it has to do with the globalization of the species. Here we are, Abraham. I mean, how long have we been global? How long have there been jet planes? How long has there been Zoom? Here you are, you and I get to talk across, thousands of miles and be like great friends that we haven't seen each other in a long time. But, that's an amazing thing. We've got such amazing stuff out there. So one of the amazing things is this, and we curse it because we get doom scrolling and, we get lost and terrified in it. But imagine if, I don't know if you know this, but 90% of human beings across the planet have one of these. 90%. So imagine if there was a requirement and we were able to enforce it somewhat, as well as we can with government and everything, but there's a requirement that this machine is required to tell that, particularly in realms of where democracy is involved, is required to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. All right. And so all over the world, now there's a bell curve to truth, right? So there's, Galileo, when he was a young man, is way over here on the bell curve, but at the end of his life, he's way up here at the top. But still, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Wouldn't we, if that were the case, instead of our media being polarized like this, don't you think, people are smart all over the world, and they care all over the world. Don't you think that as a human community, we would be able to debate and think about and wrestle with each other and come up with what our best solution is, and we'd be able to vote in a way that makes sense, right? What an incredible thing. That's where we are right now. We've become global. And what happens when, if you look at the economics of this, it's really very interesting. We've had 250 years of enormous explosion of growth. And the United Kingdom, again, was a great facilitator of this in the early days up in the North Country. And there's still that kind of energy. Scotland and the Enlightenment and all that. Incredible. But, and we've got all these things, but if what we had was the best system, wouldn't we find at the top of every hierarchy of power, of every government, every corporation, every nonprofit, wouldn't we find at the top of every one of those the best of humanity, our wisdom and our compassion? And I think if we had the best system, we would. And so what I began to realize was, and wrestle with was, well, why is this not happening? And is there a way to make it happen? And one more thing about why it's not happening is that you and I are very familiar with the term scalability, right? That's very important to business. So when scalability becomes something that is global, then what happens is that the negative externalities, so there's negative externalities with every business. But you think about the oil companies, their negative externality was that they burn up the planet, but they didn't realize that at first. But when you go global, not only do all of your systems work for great profit, but the negative externalities go global as well. That's why we're in the dilemma we're in right now. There's a solution to it. And the solution is just very simply, whenever a corporation becomes becomes a corporation and has the privilege to use capital and leverage like crazy and use the media in powerful ways, that they become required to place the truth, democracy, humanity, and the planet ahead of their own self-interest. And if that had happened, we would not be in the fix we're in right now. And if it happens, and I think it has to happen if we're going to be sustainable as a species, then what an incredible world we're about to enter. And that's how I view this time, is I think we're on the verge of entering, and I don't know, on the verge, is it on the verge 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or is it 100, 200 years? But if we can last that long, but we're on the verge of entering an incredible era where people feel free.
Well, I certainly hope it's more like 5 years than 100 years.
Me too, man.
And I feel that this third domain is probably it's definitely the least that financial planners are, is the one that the financial planners are least equipped to engage with. And maybe, I just want to take your thought, maybe they don't need to, right? Because on the moment, in terms of, the domain, the freedom of the moment, I can understand how that's within my control as a person, as a financial planner, and I can directly encourage, impact my client to take moments in their lives to enjoy and enforce that domain of freedom. I have a great degree of control, if not even complete control, over my life domain, or at least I would like to think so, and I can enforce freedom and enjoy freedom there. When it comes to the third domain, which is about the whole of civilization, it's so challenging. There is intense competition for resources between individuals and corporations and countries. It's very hard to know where to start.
Yeah. I hope everybody who just heard what Abraham said picks up my book and reads it. Because I think I've got a way to start, and I think it's really pretty cool. And when you're talking about, you are talking about I love the frame that you've put on this, that financial advisors, why should they, and approach civilization, and isn't that the furthest from them? Well, let me explain. Let me give a few reasons why I think why I'd counter that. And one of the major terms for why I would disagree with that position is the term fiduciary. And fiduciary is a little bit stronger in America. It's more debated, and but the movement that I'm kind of starting and promoting is called fiduciary in all things, and fiat. And in one of the things that a financial life planner is, more than anything else, is they're a fiduciary for their clients. They more than almost any other profession, model what it is to put their clients first, to make sure that their clients' concerns come ahead of their own concerns, even for profit. Our clients' concerns come first. So we have a position in society that's pretty incredible. And if we open to the power of that and the leadership aspect of that, I think we've got, there's a lot we can do. And let me just add another thing. You say that, well, maybe we don't need to. When I was doing my world tour, talking all over the world in countries, poor countries, wealthy countries, democratic dictatorship, um, uh, I found that everywhere I went, people wanted democracy. And one of the most touching places I went was Hong Kong, where, of course, their passion for democracy was huge. And this was 5-6 years ago, before the most recent clampdown. So the thing that I would caution financial advisors and financial life planners, people who are concerned about their clients' freedom, about is think about how possible is life planning right now in Hong Kong,
Mm, mm,
and
mm,
therefore similarly all over China. How possible
mm,
is life planning really delivering people into their dream of freedom? How
mm,
possible
mm,
is it in Russia?
mm.
How possible is it in Iran? How possible so that could happen here, as Sinclair
Yeah.
Lewis said in his famous book in the 1930s. That could happen here as well. So I think that if I think that our capacity for leadership is a great thing, and why would we not want to step up into that and step out into our community and say I'm a fiduciary, and it's what society ought to be. We ought to have a fiduciary society. And here's one other thing about this. We think about the planet, the undermining of the planet, or the undermining of democracy, or the undermining of the truth with the kind of the news media the way it is. How much have banks and insurance companies facilitated that? Because they lend if the money looks good, if the numbers look good, they'll lend money to those companies. Well, if we had a fiduciary in all things model as we incorporate, they wouldn't do that. And we're close to those companies. We're close to the banks. We're close to the insurance companies. So wouldn't it be a wonderful thing for us to step up, not merely out in our community, but to our providers and say, hey, guys, I'm a fiduciary. Why aren't you? And wouldn't it be wonderful if you were? And if you feel that there's too much competition and you can't be, well, let's start talking about it and maybe get together with other people in your industry, and let's make that the way society works. So there's my thought on all that.
It's a powerful framing, and it kind of hits me when you were asking that question, that life planning and individual freedom is possible because civilization makes it so.
Yeah.
And if we lost, democracy and civilization, then we lose individual freedom and self-actualization, and that's so on that basis, it's certainly worth defending, and you did a great job in the book talking about fiduciary and why the way I'm thinking about this is, as an advisor, fiduciary means you put your client's interest above your own. And I like your framing that providers and banks and people that we're doing business with, we can require the same standard of them, that they put the client's interest above their own. I think that's very, very powerful and compelling.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. No, thank you for that. And I want to thank you greatly for reading so deeply the book, Abraham. Touches me.
It's a powerful book. I want to thank you for writing it, and thank you for making making the time to to come on the podcast. Before we wrap this up, there's a quote I like in that third domain, where you're quoting someone, Dorothy Day. I don't know who she is, but I'll read the quote.
Oh,
And it says, people say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time,
yeah.
take one step at a time. A pebble cast into the pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has a right to sit down and feel hopeless. There is much work to do. And that is so powerful that even if we can't do, we all want to do big things to preserve civilization and to make it better. But actually, it starts in the small action, the way we treat our clients, the words that we speak into the world, the way we run our businesses. And you've epitomized this in the way that you constantly, relentlessly are pushing us, in that direction. So I thank you very much for all of your work, all of your contribution, to the profession and to our clients. And I guess I want to ask your final thoughts. What do you want to leave the audience with? What do you want us to take away from this? And what's next for you?
Those are two questions, and I'll try my best. I mean, I think the first one is that what do I want to leave you with? We're meant to live in freedom, man. I mean, right? It's just it brings smiles to our face, and it's how we're meant to live, and we're meant to live alive, and everybody, every human being is meant for that. So take it on for yourself, take it on for your clients, and then look at what can I do? In the book I talk about very small things and very large things. I designed some emblems that you could even put in a very small way on your website that say I believe in this stuff. I want the world to be fiduciary. So but believe in freedom. Take it on, and take it on in all three of the domains, so that each moment is yours and your life is yours. And recognize that civilization is yours. One of the cool things for me in this last bit about recognizing that civilization is mine is, I may be just cooking dinner, and I suddenly think civilization is mine, and I go, okay, so what I'm doing right now is contributing in some way to civilization. And that's a beautiful thing. So I'll take on some of the small things even in life and just go, well, in this way too, maybe I'm making myself a better person. Maybe it works better in the family. I don't know what it is, but all kinds of things. So civilization is yours, and it's very important. And then you asked a second. So that's the takeaway. The takeaway is you're meant to live in freedom. And so is everybody you know. Let's make it happen. If we were all living in freedom, we wouldn't be at odds with each other. We would feel happiness in the freedom of the person next to us. What a beautiful thing. And we would feel so much more trust in each other, knowing that everybody is pursuing and living their dream of freedom. Wow, incredible. So for me, I think in a way, I'm at a crossroads, Abram. When you said, how many books have you written? And I mentioned the 5 or 6 that are they're online, and they are books of photography and poetry. And they're books of how nature and the present moment in nature it delivers freedom. And if you love beautiful things, you can get it online easily for free, different elements of it for free. It's I think you'll like it. And but that was my my dream of freedom was to deliver that, was to live like that and deliver it into the world. So I now have finished that. I wanted to do a 2-page spread for every day of the year and every week of the year. So I've got almost 1,000 pages of poetry and photography talking about living more in the moment and being in nature. They're beautiful. I'm so proud of that. And now it's done. So what do I do next? So I'm in that place, and I've gone back to the 3 questions a lot. And I may surprise you. I think I've alluded to this. I want to spend more time in the UK is one thing. I mean, I know it may sound crazy.
I'm trying to get away from the UK. No, you can't. No.
Well, I know all my friends do, and they say, oh, the weather, oh, this, oh, that. But, there's something about, and part of it's living. There are 2 places I love in the UK. I really love Cornwall, because it's really quiet down there and really simple, and you can really be in nature. And it's a beautiful place in the summer in particular. And I love London because I love, you quoted William Blake, you quoted Dorothy Day. She was in America. But, incredible people have lived in that city and have given us a history that's pretty incredible. Now, some pretty horrible people have lived there too, but we can aspire to the great ones, and we can learn from them. And there's great plays, great music, great thinking. I want to live with more of that environment, as well as the global sense that London has, the diversity that's there. It's so wonderful. And so that's one of the things. And the other thing is this notion of fiduciary in all things, fiat. At this point in my life, I've lived a lot in the present moment. I've given, I think, a lot of my life to life planning to help people understand how to bring clients to freedom. I'm troubled by the world. I want the world to be free too. And my thought is that, and one of the things, and London could facilitate this because there are more, I live out in nature and out in the wilderness in a way, and London's filled with conversation possibilities and global possibilities. One of the things that I'm really pushing right now and here I'll mention it to you as well, I think it's time to have conferences dedicated to this notion of fiduciary in all things and debated. Because you raised some great questions, and there are many more. What happens to the economy? If that happens, what happens? How do you do it when you've got enormous warfare occurring? How do you manage it? What's the time frame? Those are really great questions, and I've begun to put together with both mostly academics and financial leaders the possibility this year of conferences dedicated to these questions, or at least having a debate, maybe a keynote and then a debate. What would this mean? So I think it's time to really talk about it. I've been talking about it in podcasts and everything and in my book, but I think it's time we got everybody really talking about it. So I'm excited about trying to make that happen.
Fascinating stuff. I love London too. There is no day I walk in that great city that I'm not grateful and amazed just by the history and the wealth and the diversity of that incredible city. And as you think about this conference thing, we would love to be part of that. If we can play a tiny little role in making that happen, it'll be an honor and a privilege for us. So, George Kinder, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your contributions, immense contributions to pushing this profession and humanity forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Abraham. Always a pleasure being with you, my friend. Really good. Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's show.
massive thanks to my production crew, especially Jake Osha, Melissa Canham, and the entire team. And of course, to our sponsor, Timeline, the market leading provider of integrated planning technology and model portfolio service to advisors. I do hope you've enjoyed today's show. Head over to Apple Podcast and give us your review there. Until next time, goodbye.